All right, welcome back. Today we're diving into something really fascinating, a kind of political sleight of hand. It's a sophisticated strategy that helps modern authoritarian states survive, even when there's huge popular pressure for change. It's the story of how regimes can look like they're opening up, while actually they're tightening their grip. So, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll talk about that illusion of change that came after a wave of uprisings. Then we're going to peel back the layers of this political facade to see what's really going on behind the curtain. We'll dig into the grip of the so-called deep state, look at the strategic playbook they use, and finally, try to understand what it means to participate in a system where you have no real power. Okay, so let's go back in time a bit to 2011, the Arab Spring. Massive protests were sweeping across the Middle East, and really, the whole world was watching, expecting this huge wave of democratic change. But that's not exactly what happened, was it? In a surprising number of places, the old regimes, or ones that looked a lot like them, managed to hold on tight. Which, of course, begs the question. How did they do it? How did they manage to stay in power? Was it just through brute force? Or was there something much more complex, much more strategic at play? Well, it turns out that survival wasn't just about suppression, it was about performance. And this brings us to the core idea today, the constitutional charade. Just think of it as political theater. Regimes put on this big show of liberalization. Hey, look, a new constitution, a more powerful prime minister, more seats in parliament. But it's all designed to absorb that public anger, to let the steam out of the system, all while keeping the real core of their power completely untouched. So what does this charade actually look like on the surface? Well, these regimes get busy building a really appealing, modern storefront, a facade that's designed to impress everybody, both their own citizens and the international community. And we're not talking about minor tweaks here. These are often huge, internationally publicized projects, big social reforms, designed to send a clear signal. This is a brand new era. We're breaking with the past. I mean, just look at Saudi Arabia under Mohammed bin Salman. We saw these massive, tangible, and genuinely popular changes. Women were finally granted the right to drive. Cinemas opened up after decades. They started hosting huge concerts. All of this generated enormous international headlines and really projected this image of a kingdom that was modernizing at lightning speed. But behind that glossy, modern facade, a much darker story was unfolding. At the exact same time all these modernizing reforms were being announced, a totally ruthless consolidation of power was happening in the background. Rivals and dissidents were being rounded up. So it just goes to show you, yeah, maybe the social rules were changing, but the old rules of absolute power, they hadn't changed one bit. And this gets us right to the heart of the issue. If these new institutions, like parliaments, have more power on paper, who's still making the big decisions? Who's really running the show? This is where we have to talk about the deep state. And look, this isn't some conspiracy theory. It's a term for the unelected networks, the military, the security services, the powerful elite families that operate behind the scenes, far away from public view and with zero accountability. And if you want to know where a state's true priorities are, just follow the money. This data, from right before the uprisings in 2010, shows that in places like Jordan and Egypt, spending on the military and security often dwarfed the money spent on things like health and education. That tells you everything you need to know about where the real power is held. So you end up with this untouchable, authoritarian core. And here's the ironic part. They're actually shielded from public accountability by the very reforms that are supposed to increase it. The new parliament can debate all at once, but the deep state still decides the huge issues like war, peace, and national security.
So you have to wonder, why go to all this trouble? Why create this elaborate performance? Well, this isn't just about short-term survival. It's a calculated long-term strategy to make authoritarian rule seem legitimate and to strengthen it for a whole new generation.
And the playbook they use is, well, it's remarkably effective. First, you announce some popular reforms to let some steam out of the system. Then you divide the opposition. You invite the moderate reformers into the new government. That immediately isolates the more radical voices who refuse to play along. And crucially, if the economy tanks, you now have a perfect scapegoat. The very parliament you just created. This keeps the real power center shielded from any criticism. This insight from scholar Roger Owen is just key. In a system like this, elections themselves become a tool of power. They get transformed from a way for citizens to choose their leaders into a managed spectacle, a way for the regime to orchestrate dissent,
rather than be threatened by it.
So all this leads us to the fundamental deal, the constitutional bargain, that's being offered to citizens in these places. It's a very specific kind of contract, and you really have to read the fine print. And this comparison lays it out perfectly. On one side, here's what you get: the right to debate policy, the chance to vote, maybe even a formal political office. You get all the symbols of political power. But here's what you don't get: the actual power to change the leadership, the ability to veto strategic decisions, any real political leverage. You don't get the substance. You could boil it all down to this: citizens are given a voice, but they're given no veto. They get a platform to speak, but they're denied any real mechanism to actually stop the actions of the ruling elite. The whole system is designed to manage discontent, not to actually empower the public. This single sentence just captures the essence of the entire charade perfectly. It's the illusion of inclusion. You're invited to the table, but you have absolutely no say over what's on the menu. And that leaves us with this final big question. We've seen how this sophisticated strategy works, but is it a stable, long-term model for governance in the 21st century? Can a state really be both modernizing and authoritarian forever? Or is this just a clever way to delay an inevitable reckoning between the people who rule and the people who are ruled?